Hi there, and welcome to Horrific Tales and Ghostly Trails. I'm Robin Shuckburgh, and tonight I'm taking you on a ghostly trail through the county of Oxfordshire. Phantom monks, ghostly highwaymen, supernatural stones, and spectral stories of the English Civil War. We will find them all. Oxfordshire is a cultured county, brimming with rich history, so it's no surprise that there are plenty of ghost stories to be found amongst the valleys and vales of this leafy region. It's a very large area to cover, and difficult for me to attempt alone, so I've enlisted some help. I'm very pleased to welcome Paul Barrand to the channel, a local thespian who shares with me a passion for history and storytelling. I've no doubt he'll be a wonderful addition to the channel, and I look forward to passing him the baton when we reach Tame in the east of the county. Now, where else to begin our adventure tonight but amongst the dreaming spires of Oxford City? On Oxford High Street, hiding down a small alleyway, is a wonderful old pub called the Chequers. This place has a strange history, originating from the 13th century and in the possession of a moneylender by the 15th century. The pub's name probably comes from the checkerboard used to advertise the services of the owner's moneylending business. It was rebuilt in the early 1500s by Alderman Richard Kent, and from then on used as a tavern. It is from this period that our ghost story hails. As Henry VIII's religious reformation swept the country, legend has it that a tunnel was built from the Chequers to the Mitre public house on the other side of the High Street. Apparently, it was constructed to allow persecuted Catholics secretly celebrating Mass in the Chequers an escape route as they struggled to avoid the relentless agents of Henry VIII. However, one dreadful night, Henry VIII's men had received a tip-off about this tunnel. As a party of monks were making good their escape from the Chequers, they found themselves trapped underground. The king's agents had sealed off both ends of the tunnel, leaving them entombed to starve or suffocate to death. It is said that the phantom chanting of these clerics can still be heard in the cellars of both the Chequers and the Mitre. Not far down the High Street, we come to the Old Bank Hotel. Located on the junction of the High Street and Magpie Lane, the Old Bank Hotel has a colourful past. As its name suggests, it spent much of its history as a bank, and during these times of mortgages and money lending, rumours began to spread about a ghostly presence in the building. Whilst many dismiss these rumours as fantastic, some employees insist that something strange is going on. Flickering lights, ghostly voices, objects moving on their own, and others being mischievously hidden. A figure in a long brown dress, moving from one end of the building to the other, was witnessed by some of the banking staff, often passing through walls and displays. Before it was a bank, during the 17th century, a Puritan family lived here, and Prudence, the daughter, got into a relationship with a cavalier. When their affair was discovered by her father, she was banished from her home. Initially, this wasn't a problem. She simply moved in with her cavalier lover, until war took him away from Oxford, and she was left to return home, begging for forgiveness. Her cavalier partner never returned, and she spent the rest of her long life in complete solitude, eventually taking her own life. Many believe the figure in brown is that of Prudence, roaming the house, sadly searching for her long-lost lover, who had left her with a broken heart. Oxford played a key role in the English Civil War, acting as King Charles I's capital and headquarters. It's no surprise, really, that ghosts of royalist soldiers and nobles have been spotted. The ill-fated king is thought to wander the halls of Christchurch College behind me, often without his head. He's also been spotted in the Bodleian Library. In 1645, the king asked to borrow a book from the library, but it was explained to him that no books ever left the premises, and his request was refused. He was not best pleased. It is claimed that his ghost glides around the upper reading room at night, removing a book, only to read one line before replacing it back on the shelf. Could this be a late rebellion against a decision that even the king was powerless to overturn? Just a stone's throw down the road from the Old Bank Hotel is University College, known locally as Univ. Our ghost sighting here comes once again from the Civil War. A man by the name of Obadiah Walker, who was a master of the college during the latter half of the 17th century, was a staunch royalist. When Oxford was encircled by the forces of Parliament and captured in 1646, Walker was one of the many academics expelled from their university positions because of their loyalty to the king. When James II fled England after being deposed in the Glorious Revolution of 1688, Walker attempted to follow him. He didn't make it very far before he was captured, returned to Oxford, and put on trial. He spent 2 years in prison, just avoiding the death penalty. Then he was released, but still had no university position. He lived on what small charity the college could give him, but his catastrophic fall from favour is said to have broken him completely. It is said that to this day, his melancholy spirits haunts University College Room 1, Staircase 8, the room in which he spent the final 10 years of his life. Just behind Univ is Merton College. J.R.R. Tolkien, author of the famous Lord of the Rings, studied at Exeter College and spent much of his academic career here in Oxford. Indeed, his work draws much inspiration from the city and the surrounding countryside. In 1945, he moved to Merton to teach English language and literature, just as he was writing the final instalment of his Lord of the Rings trilogy. He stayed here until his retirement in 1959, when he moved to Bournemouth with his wife Edith. After Edith's death in 1971, Tolkien moved back to Merton, heartbroken at his loss. He was a recognisable character, usually seen wearing a tweed jacket, waistcoat, and of course a pipe, without which he was rarely spotted. His ghost is equally recognisable, apparently wandering the corridors and quads of Merton. Some occupants of his study have reported smelling gusts of pipe smoke, as if Tolkien had just been in the room, watching over up-and-coming writers. There are numerous other hauntings amongst Oxford University's colleges. Trinity College on Broad Street is said to be haunted by the ghosts of twins Noel and Christopher Chivas, who were formerly students at the college. Their phantoms are elderly-looking and clad in clerical collars. They are seen floating through Kettle Hall, one of the oldest buildings in the college. Disturbingly, only the top halves of their bodies are visible. For many years, rumours of a supernatural presence in the Trinity College chapel have been in circulation. In 1966, an event fanned the flames of these rumours. The chapel organist, having completed the first hymn on a brand new organ, collapsed on the instrument, stone dead. The official cause of his death was said to be a heart attack, but it won't surprise you to hear that paranormal explanations for his death were numerous, and a rumour of a spirit running riot in the chapel did the rounds of the city and the university. It was always thought to have been a benevolent spirit. To give an example of the many sightings, Trinity's verger was dusting the pews one evening when he became aware of a woman dressed in black smiling at him from the back of the chapel. Walking towards her to see what she wanted, he averted his gaze briefly to negotiate a step, but on raising his head, he found she had entirely disappeared. A spectral monk has been often spotted at Wadham College, just round the corner from Trinity. Accounts from the head porter and 2 scouts tell of a phantom in white robes. The figure haunts a path across the first quad of the college, where it vanishes into the hall, heading perhaps for the high table. This area of the college happens to have been built over the site of an old Augustinian priory. Could there be a connection, perhaps? Meanwhile, we come to Morlin Bridge. A phantom has been reported here on several occasions. It's that of a small man with a dark face and a grubby coat. His ghost is associated with an event that took place in 1754 during the Oxfordshire election celebrations. The Whig victory in the election had triggered wild celebrations from Whig supporters in Oxford, but they clashed with a group of disgruntled Tory supporters in the area of Morlin Bridge. A Tory by the name of Captain Turton was passing through the crowds in his carriage, and reportedly, fed up with the commotion, he pointed his pistol out of the carriage window and fired at a jeering chimney sweep at almost point-blank range. The sweep was killed instantly, falling backwards into the river. His dishevelled phantom has been spotted frantically waving his arms, standing on the parapet of the bridge, and then pitching backward off the bridge into the water below. We move now to Oxford Castle, an absolute must-see for any visitor to Oxford, especially if they're looking for ghost stories. The castle was built as a motte and bailey in about 1071, reusing earlier Saxon foundations. We will certainly come back and take a comprehensive look at this ancient place. It's home to all kinds of ghosts, ghouls, and grisly tales, but tonight we will just take a scratch at the surface. One popular ghost spotted here is that of Mary Blandy. She was imprisoned here and later hanged, probably in the castle courtyard. In the 1700s, her father was looking to marry her off to a suitable wealthy man, and he found one in Captain Henry Cranston. Cranston came from Scotland. It turned out, however, that he already had a wife back home, so Mary's father, rather late but not surprisingly, realized the impossibility of the match and refused the couple any further contact. Cranston, however, was not that easily deterred. One day, Mary received by messenger a small package of white powder from Cranston, with an instruction to mix it into her father's food. He told her it was nothing but a simple mood enhancer that would secure her father's blessing for their marriage. Soon afterwards, her father became seriously ill. It turned out that the harmless powder was not harmless at all. It was, in fact, arsenic. Her father's condition deteriorated fast, and he accused his daughter of intentionally poisoning him. She, all the while, begging for his forgiveness. Despite Mary's claims that she had no idea she had administered poison to her father, she was arrested, imprisoned here at Oxford Castle, sentenced to death in March 1752, and hanged on April the 6th. Her ghost has been seen in several places around the castle, including on the castle mound. Oxford Castle has also doubled as a prison, particularly in more recent centuries, until it was finally decommissioned in 1996. Many of the ghostly experiences have been in the prison. Screams of pain, sounds of footsteps, and some poltergeists throwing things around. Some people entering the prison debtors' tower have even felt unbearable physical pain. In 1135, Henry I died without leaving a male heir. The kingdom descended into civil war. The period became known as the Anarchy. Henry's nephew Stephen believed he had an honourable claim to the throne, but his cousin Matilda had other ideas. By 1142, the situation had escalated into a war between the two factions, and Oxford acted as a kind of frontier between them. In that same year, Stephen launched a surprise raid on the city of Oxford, laying siege to the castle and trapping Matilda inside. One night, when the landscape was entirely covered with snow, Matilda, wrapping herself and her servant companions in white cloaks, climbed out of a low window and daringly made good her escape. She fled across the frozen river and all the way to Wallingford and safety. Her spirit has been spotted many times since, often dressed in the famous white cloak, apparently reliving her exciting experience. On one occasion, comparatively recently, the spectre frightened a young prison guard into thinking a real escape was in progress. He raised the alarm, but no prisoners were missing. His older colleagues took a while to let him live down the mistake. The ancient crypt just beneath the castle is home to many more stories, but we'll save those for another time. For now, we'll move to the rest of the city. There are many more ghost stories to tell in Oxford, and another time we may well paint the full picture. For now, however, we bid you good night and a happy Halloween. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and keep an eye out for more ghostly tales. As we head north to leave Oxford and head for the wilds of the countryside, we must pause briefly at what was, until very recently, the world-famous Eagle and Child pub. We've already mentioned J.R.R. Tolkien's supernatural presence at Merton College, and he was known to frequent this pub when he was in Oxford and to have written often at a table in there. As well as associations with many famous writers, there is also known to be a ghost in the cellar. The pub dates back at least to the time of the Civil War, and much like the tale of the Chequers in the High Street, a secret passage is said to have connected the pub to St John's College, the other side of St Giles, presumably for clandestine escapes from people with opposing loyalties. The tunnel was rumoured to be haunted. On one occasion, the landlord was down in the cellar changing a barrel when he noticed from the corner of his eye the figure of a woman who he assumed to be his wife. He finished his work and turned to speak to her, only to see her vanish through the wall. His wife was adamant that she'd been upstairs the whole time, and he realised that he'd heard no footsteps on the stairs. So it was a difficult encounter to explain, and the landlord was completely convinced he had seen a ghost. The outskirts of Oxford have some spooky stories too. To the west, in Botley, we find another haunting from the time of the Civil War. Along Arnold's Way, where the Matthew Arnold School now stands, the ghost of a murderer has been seen. He was a man known as Old Marston, and during the Civil War he discovered that his wife was having an affair with one of Oliver Cromwell's soldiers. In a blaze of jealous rage, he killed her with an axe. It's not quite clear if he and his wife lived hereabouts, or if he lured her to what was then an isolated spot in order to butcher her. We're not even sure if Marston was ever brought to justice, but it seems his restless spirit haunts the area to this day, suggesting perhaps that he felt eternally guilty for his monstrous actions. Further out in the same direction lies the village of Cumnor, which is home to another gruesome murder. There was once a grand old house called Cumnor Place that was demolished by the Earl of Abingdon in 1810. It had passed through many families over the centuries, but its famous haunting stems from early in the building's history. On September the 8th, 1560, Amy Dudley, just 28 years old, was found dead at the foot of her staircase. She was the daughter of Sir John Robarts, a wealthy landowner from Norfolk, and she was married to Robert Dudley, who would later become the Earl of Leicester. The cause of her death is to this day shrouded in mystery, with rumours and speculation rife among the local gossips at the time. It was thought by a few that she had simply fallen down the stairs, but the absence of most of the household staff and residents at the time of her death made the circumstances seem suspicious. Many were convinced that Sir Robert himself had conspired to kill his wife, framing it as an accident in order to clear the path for him to marry Queen Elizabeth. Some went as far as to claim that Queen Elizabeth herself was in on the plot, but there is absolutely no evidence to support that theory. If the poor woman's death was indeed a conspiracy, it did not work out well for Sir Robert. Despite the inquest jury returning a verdict of accidental death, when the Queen heard the rumours of Dudley's involvement, she distanced herself from the whole idea that she and Sir Robert might ever marry. Meanwhile, Amy's restless spirit was said to haunt Cumnor Place. Locals were afraid to go near the place, and some said it destroyed the peace of the village. 9 clergymen arrived from Oxford and elsewhere to exorcise the spirit, and it is said they captured and drowned it in the nearby pond. This pond became known as Madam Dudley's Pond, and reputedly never froze, however cold the weather, a sign that made the locals believe the ghost still sat at the bottom of the pond, with always the threat that it might reappear. It seems it often did. Reports of Amy's ghost around Cumnor continued into the 19th century, and a short ballad by 18th century poet William Mickle describes the phenomenon. The village maids with fearful glance avoid the ancient moss-grown wall, nor ever lead the merry dance among the groves of Cumnor Hall. Since the demolition of Cumnor Place in 1810, little more unrest came from the spirit, though some poltergeist activity reported at the rectory was attributed to Amy. Whether this is true, of course, we can't be entirely sure. A separate, eerie legend seems to have foretold Sir Robert's death. Sir Robert is said to have told his friends that whilst separated from his party when out hunting at Cornbury Park on the 26th of August 1588, the ghost of Amy Dudley appeared to him. She told him they would be reunited in 10 days' time. It seems this prophecy came true, as Sir Robert died on the 4th of September 1588. We will travel further west later on, but for now we circle back towards Oxford and then head slightly northwards. On the outskirts of Oxford sits the lovely village of Wolvercote, right on the edge of the world-famous Port Meadow. In this meadow, and right next to the River Thames, lie the ruins of the Godstone Nunery. This site was founded in the 12th century by a noblewoman, Edith de Lanceline, after deciding to found a group of Benedictine nuns. It was later suppressed in the 16th century, and from then on fell to ruin. The abbey church was built into a mansion called Godstow House by Henry VIII's physician, George Owen. And in 1645 it was badly damaged in the Civil War. And over the centuries, stone from the site was robbed for other local buildings. A local tradition dictates that at sunrise on May morning, standing amongst the ruins, you can hear the ghostly echoes of nuns chanting as they would have done centuries before. But the main haunting here is actually of a woman called Rosamond Clifford, who during the 12th century was mistress to King Henry II. She was a beautiful woman, educated at Godstone Nunery, and after King Henry married Eleanor of Aquitaine, Rosamond lived out the rest of her life at Godstow Abbey as a nun, dying at the very young age of 29. She was apparently held in high enough regard to be buried in front of the high altar in the Abbey church, much to the surprise of the Bishop of Lincoln. When he visited Godstow, considering her nothing more than a harlot, he ordered her body to be reburied outside the church. Thus Rosamond's ghost can be spotted occasionally roaming the ruins of the nunnery. Her restless spirit is thought to wander as far as the Trout Inn across the river, where it is said she manifests herself in numerous ways. Tampering with glasses and furniture, whispers in the ears of both patrons and staff, as well as the scent of flowers. They've all been reported. Some have put this latter experience down to the fact that Rosamond was buried with a sprig of heather. Heading further north, we come to the village of Yarnton. Here, at College Mead Cottage, we find the ghost of a woman called Christabel, who, after learning that her lover was behaving unfaithfully, took her own life. 200 years ago, she had been courting a young man from the village and was due to join him at the village's annual harvest ball. While she was getting ready, she happened to glance out of the window of her bedroom, where she observed, to her horror, her lover arm in arm with another girl, making towards the festivities. She was so distraught at the sight that she threw herself from the gabled window on the 3rd story and died. Naturally, this unhappy ending caused her ghost to return, and she's been spotted roaming the lane leading to the house, as well as the adjoining meadow. More recent occupants of the house report that she returns occasionally and floats down the stairs, leaving a scent of sweet perfume as she leaves. Like so many of our other ghostly trails, Yarnton has another haunting that hails from the Civil War. Viewers from the Cotswold Explorer may remember us telling the story of King Charles's dash from Oxford and how his careful manoeuvring through Yarnton and the Evenlode Valley allowed him to evade 2 armies of the Parliament bent on trapping him in Oxford. On the night of June the 3rd, 1644, under the cover of darkness, the Royal Army passed through Yarnton via Frogwell Down Lane and had passed Burford before the parliamentary forces had any idea that Charles had quitted Oxford. Legend has it that on the night of June the 3rd, even to this day, the sounds that accompanied the fleeing army can be heard in Frogwell Down Lane. Horses' hooves, marching boots, the clinking of weapons and harnesses, and the low mutterings of the troops as they traverse the lane. It must have been a tense, exciting and memorable night for the villagers of Yarnton that summer. Moving to the northeast, we pass through Kidlington, looking in on the Red Lion pub. The building we see today is 20th century, but an inn of the same name stood on the site until it was destroyed by fire. The ghost of a woman who lived in a caravan very close by is said to haunt this pub. She launches objects around the rooms, particularly in the kitchen and upstairs bathrooms. It's believed her caravan was destroyed in the same fire that brought down the Red Lion, explaining perhaps the connection.